the fundamental kind of like shift from Indeed is it moves from being a job search only to really being more of a kind of like a matchmaking type of engine. If you believe some of the news cycles, there are no jobs and jobs are going away. It's just not true. Marketing job isn't done until people facing your customers can actually have the right type of conversation. If you want to get into marketing, you got to be thinking about it from an engineering perspective. We've created this new category of jobs called demand engineering.
The biggest lie that we're telling young marketers about the actual role of a CMO today?
That it's fun. It's hard work.
We've got James Whitemore on the show today, the CMO of Indeed, the largest hiring platform on the planet, period. End the story, right? Like, you guys are the biggest.
That is right.
That is right. Okay. So I feel like this is going to be a really smart conversation, not just because you look really smart, but you do. I'm not going to lie. You look really, it's the glasses and the hair, I think, that, it just...
Thanks.
Yeah, I don't get that. I definitely don't get that distinguished look. But James, welcome to the Pivot. I'm so excited to have you here. Why don't you do our audience a favor, introduce yourself, and then we'll kick this thing off.
Yeah, sure. Well, James Whitemore, CMO at Indeed, relatively new to Indeed, been here for just around 8 months now, and my career has been built basically across sales and marketing. Started as a salesperson very early in my career and moved into marketing, then back into sales, into marketing, sales, and has really been focused around kind of like tech industries, from data storage to networking to telcos to cloud services. And did a few startups which were very successful, worked in big tech for a long time, and now it was time for something different. Indeed, which is a big tech platform. It is one of the world's largest scaled marketplaces, but it presents itself in a slightly different way than your traditional tech company, in that it's a job platform. So still learning the industry, that's for sure, but it's a fascinating place to work.
Yeah, well, 8 months, you're kind of a veteran in this industry at this point. We, it's interesting. We just did a show, which hasn't released yet, but it was on the first 90 days of taking over the CMO role at a large organization similar to Indeed. So maybe we can talk about that at some point. The first 90 days, how do you structure the first 90 days? So I've got a ton of questions here, but let's spend the moment on your actual career. You gave us kind of the zigzag path. When did you get into marketing, and when did you know you were kind of on that path that you wanted to run marketing and own the entire function?
The first foray into marketing from sales was basically, here's the mouthy young sales guy who's always telling the marketing people how to do things. And someone said to me one day, well, if you know so much about it, why don't you come and work in marketing? And I thought, yeah, why not? And it was fascinating. That was IBM. And IBM put me through a product and brand management kind of almost like a training course, kind of like, which was very, very fascinating, and fell in love with marketing and the interactions between sales and marketing. And over the course of my career, have probably spent 50% in sales, 50% in marketing. There's been a few times where I've run sales and marketing as one function, particularly in the startup environments I've been a part of, which is always a fun thing to do. But I keep coming back to marketing because at the end of the day, I think if you get marketing right, it has enormous impact on revenue and profitable revenue growth. I'm always very kind of like conscious of the ties that we have into the selling team. So, for example, here at Indeed, I have the sales enablement teams part of my organization, because I firmly believe that a marketing job isn't done until people facing your customers can actually have the right type of conversation. So always looking for those connections into the sales team as well.
Yeah, it's an interesting, it's fascinating how you talk about sales and marketing. I too, I've always believed it is part of one of the same in the organization. One of the, I think the throughputs or the trend lines that we've had in a number of these conversations has been, does marketing own sales? And we get a lot of different answers there. So I'm curious to get your take on that. Does marketing own sales, or even product at that point, or do they just have to work in conjunction with?
I think work in conjunction with. Under no circumstance would I ever claim that marketing, owns sales or drives sales. It's a partnership, and that partnership changes, and is very dependent on the type of company that you're working in.
Hmm.
I always think that companies typically fall into one of three categories. You get marketing-led companies, you get sales-led companies, or you get product-led companies.
Right.
Indeed is a very product-led company, and kind of like sales and marketing, kind of like working together to really monetize those products and deliver those products into the marketplace is really really key. But I think of it more of a partnership rather than ownership.
Right, right. So, okay, so I said we weren't going to get into Indeed, but I lied. I want
Mm.
to, if
Okay.
you're open to it, I
Yeah.
actually want to stay here for a moment,
Yeah.
because Indeed has been around forever, right?
Yeah.
They've been around a very long time, and they've had a lot of different lives
Yeah.
within that time frame. Same as IBM. You were with IBM, and IBM has been 30 different companies at by this point. What does that mean for a CMO coming in? I almost said new CMO. You're not a new CMO,
Yeah.
but for a CMO coming into a new opportunity, when the company has gone through many iterations, and not bad iterations, they've
Yeah.
grown and they've evolved along the way. What does that look like from your perspective? What is that next step for you?
Well, honestly, the first time I got a call on Indeed, it was like, why the heck would Indeed be interested in me, and why would I be interested in Indeed? Kind of like, and then as I got into the conversations, and you look at the transformation that is taking place in not just Indeed, but across the hiring industry and the hiring tech platforms, this is a moment of kind of like great inflection for Indeed, where you have to move from what has driven the company's business for the last 20 plus years of kind of like ad based search to a model which is much more about kind of like talent matching, where you are kind of like taking the onus from the job seeker to go search for a job and giving employers the tools to go source the right talent that they need and to deal with the kind of like high volumes of applications that they get in very kind of like efficient ways through kind of like screening and tools. So kind of like the fundamental kind of like shift from Indeed is it moves from being a job search only to really being more of a kind of like a matchmaking type of engine. So big transitions taking place, and that's what I find fascinating.
Yeah, that you explain that and talk about that like you've been in this industry for 20 years.
Yeah.
You did that really, really well. I will say. So 8 months, and you've done a lot of learning there
Well,
for
back to
sure.
the first kind of like 90 days, kind of like I said here, you just got to give me 90 days to learn this business. And you might think that a hiring business is pretty simple. It's really complicated when you're operating a platform at the scale and global nature that Indeed is, and you're looking across job seekers, small businesses, all the way up to the world's largest enterprises.
Right.
The platform and the business and the way that it's monetized is hugely complicated. So I think I did enough time and research to kind of like really made sure I understood the business before I started making any changes.
Yeah. Now, how is this vertical, is hiring very different from your previous roles? I mean, I know it's different, but is the job really that different, or is it just learning different wording, different vernacular?
Um, well, for me, this is the first time in my career where I've really had B2C, at scale. And if you think about the job seekers, it's a consumer audience, it's a B2C type of motion. So kind of like that's very new for me, and B2B and enterprise kind of like marketing, kind of like second nature.
Hmm.
Really kind of like it's been fascinating to look at the differences between the way that I've operated in the past, and how that plays out in a B2C marketplace. The most fascinating thing is that I come from worlds where the selling cycles were typically kind of like 12, 24 months of selling
Yeah.
cycles, and when you did something in marketing, you wouldn't really see the impacts of that for kind of like for a selling cycle, and by the time you saw the impact, you'd forgotten what you'd done in the first place. Indeed's business, you see it on a minute by minute basis. You
Yeah.
can change content, you can change algorithms, you can
Yeah.
change promotions and offers, and you see exactly the impacts that it has within the marketplace. And I find that fascinating. The whole ability to kind of like test, learn, iterate, fail, move on, kind of like is great.
Yeah, and at the scale of Indeed, you're actually affecting massive change very quickly. One tweak can mean a lot of revenue, can mean a lot of something. Okay, so I'm curious here. What's so you've been in marketing now for how long?
I'd say kind of like 20 years actually in marketing roles. This is my seventh CMO role, so
Okay,
good
so
while.
over that 20 years, and we don't I want to go back to year one through year 20 and what's the difference, but through that evolution, I guess from the time you started to take on the CMO roles, I'm assuming that's pre-COVID, right? So pre-COVID, you took on your first CMO role up through now. How's that evolved in that short time frame?
Things have changed so much and continue to change. And if I look just over the last a couple of years, kind of like the way that we operate as marketers is fundamentally different. And to me, one of the core changes is the ability to build addressable audiences. And
Right.
instead of working against kind of like broad segments of, I want 18 to 24-year-olds in Germany, versus to say, I want healthcare workers who are in home health services within these cities in Germany and are within the ages of 18 to 24, and to be able to do your audience builds and then run that against media engines to understand exactly how they consume media, and then build your media plans against that. Use your kind of like campaign systems with some kind of like AI tools layered onto it to
Right.
deliver some personalized content, and to be able to do that kind of like basically in a couple of days rather than kind of like have to go through these long laborious kind of like audience research, media kind of like research. It's fascinating.
Yeah, yeah. Where it took you 3 weeks to run through something is now literally 48 hours from conception to launch. How much of and I want to stay here for a minute and I want to get into AI stuff, of course, because
Yeah.
your knees deep in this. How much of and I'll call it traditional marketing. I'm not quite sure that's the right term, but demand generation, content marketing, my suspicion is that for your current role, this is huge. This
Yeah.
is this is a huge focal point for the team. But from a CMO's perspective in general, is content marketing and demand generation, is it anything near the same as it was 5 years ago, or have we really abandoned the old school, air quotes for those not watching, old school techniques, or like ebooks and guides and that type of stuff versus what we're doing today? Where is that change and how is that really different?
I mean, there's still some of that, but a lot less. And certainly, kind of like we don't do any form of content syndication or any of those kind of like tactics that you used a lot several years back. I think first up, content kind of like has changed so that it is much more short form video orientated.
Yeah.
Um, and a lot of what we would have put out in ebooks in the past, kind of like is now put out in a series of video content, kind of like explainer type of a, materials, a and yeah, we have a research lab called Hiring Labs, where kind of like in the past, well, and they still do, they publish very detailed, long form economic research on a monthly and quarterly basis. But you're also now taking that and breaking it down and thinking it from a job seeker perspective. How can we help job seekers understand where the jobs are, and what skills are required and how those skill requirements are changing? From an SMB perspective, you're looking at kind of like helping them understand more local labor market dynamics and who they may be competing for, kind of like talent with.
Hmm.
And then for large scale enterprises, you're taking a different kind of like approach where it's really about labor planning and workforce planning
Right.
and understanding kind of like global shifts in kind of like labor availability, and all of that kind of like moves out of these long form kind of like monthly and quarterly reports to be much more kind of like short kind of like engaging video type contents, podcast type of content. So it's definitely changed, and I don't think we're unique in that. And, I think that's the same for most companies.
No, but if they're consuming it, then that's it's a win.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Do you find, and this maybe gets a little off topic, and we'll bring us back in a moment, but do you find that different levels of career will consume content differently? So
yeah,
leaders, leaders within large organizations,
yeah,
IBM size, 450,000 plus, their leadership will consume content still on written, like not ebook, like white papers or actual research, versus flipping through 30 short form videos to get that. Is there a different trust level there?
there is definitely a different consumption pattern, and kind of like the ROI reports and the economic impact reports are very important for those type of audiences. But still, when you look at kind of like the very large scale employers, the
Mhm.
talent acquisition teams who are the primary users of our platforms, they really kind of like appreciate the short form kind of like video content. How do I do this? How can I use these tools to better effectively kind of like align my salary ranges, kind of like
Right.
so there's a lot of short form video content which is consumed there, but it's very different from kind of like a job seeker or an SMB. If you think
Right.
about an SMB, kind of like they're not hiring professionals, they're business people, and you have to hold them by the hand throughout the hiring process to understand how they create a job posting and how they kind of like check competitiveness of that job posting in their local markets and kind of like who they. So it's a really different type of content. Again, kind of like that, kind of like video content, audio content, consumed enormously.
Yeah, and that's and it's as that population ages out, that's going to change ever so quickly again, on how we're creating this content. So I want to go deeper into how AI is actually changing marketing inside organizations.
Yeah.
How do you see that AI is actually reshaping marketing leadership and teams? Because I've seen a relatively meaningful shift over the last just 2 years now,
Yeah.
on how these teams are being built. What skills are we looking for? How are we hiring? And I think I'll ask this again, just in case, but when a CEO is hiring a CMO, are they looking to solve specific problems? Like, what is it that they're really trying to solve for?
Yeah, mostly in my experience, when a CEO is hiring a CMO, they're really looking for a performance mindset that um, is really understanding of how marketing adds value to the business and how marketing works with sales and product,
Right.
from product adoption to revenue, kind of like program rollouts to the different audiences we serve. If you think about kind of like a job marketplace, you rely on new and fresh supply of job seekers
Right.
coming into that marketplace. So kind of like really kind of like able to show that we can keep relevant and current skill sets coming into the marketplace. So, but all of it, I think, what unifies is a performance mindset that just says, "Hey, marketing is here to contribute to revenue, to help drive profitability," and I have a clear view of how we're going to do that at this company.
Yeah. Do you think the CMO is closer to a CRO than a traditional marketer at this point?
I don't think CRO's job is kind of like typically quite complex. Our CRO runs marketing, sales, customer support and services, what we call our SBS business unit, which is the small business self-serve businesses, and your marketing is an important part of that engine. And I think the key for me as a CMO is to come to the table with the same kind of like revenue mindset, and just kind of like look at the part that marketing needs to play
Right.
to contribute to the revenue engine. And it's unique. Each one of us on the CRO staff has a very kind of like a unique perspective on how we build revenue and what our teams need to do. So
Where are we at on skills in marketing? And and I don't want to keep harping on it. It's kind of an old argument at this point. Like, is it skills in AI? Is it skills here? But it's really an interesting topic for me because I spend a lot of time talking to
yeah,
marketers, and I feel, and you might see this differently, but I feel as if some of the conversations I have, there's there's a very distinct line of who you kind of look at and you're like, okay, you're not going to be here in another year versus and I'm curious from your perspective as you're bringing people into the organization or as you're looking to round out the marketing organization, what are the skills that marketers need to have today? Because my hunch is a lot of people listening to this show will be marketers, maybe not CMOs, but marketers on the come up, right? So what are we looking at here really for them to be aware of?
I think kind of like it's a moving target, that's for sure. And as technology changes, the kind of like the skills requirements will continue to change. But what I look for, kind of like in existing teams, are people who can show kind of like adaptability and can work across multiple projects, who are not too
Mhm.
siloed in kind of like I do this. And particularly for example in social teams where kind of like you're really looking for people who are equally as comfortable being a creator as to being a content editor, to being kind of like a channel strategist,
Right, right,
a paid performance boost expert. You're looking at people who kind of like have the complete picture of functions rather than just kind of like being too siloed. So and I look at that for kind of like all the people that we bring into the organization, just that kind of like concept of uh, adaptability. Creative thinking is always
yeah,
really really key. We serve complex audiences across multiple kind of like parts of the world, and the ability to kind of like critical and creative thinking for how we really best use our resources. I think judgment and good taste are essential as marketers.
yes,
There's a lot of kind of like slop out there.
yeah, yeah. Well, just in general, yeah,
Just in general, kind of like and
yeah,
kind of like I would not tolerate kind of like a marketing machine that is just pumping out kind of like a bunch of slop. So I always look for people who've got good taste, good judgment, and those are, some of the key things I think that we're really looking for right
yeah. I think it might have been a little selfish of a question. My eldest daughter is off to college,
now.
and
Okay, what's she studying?
she starts in September, she or in August. She's undecided, but
Okay,
marketing and brand marketing,
Yeah.
has always been something she's interested in. And so I talk with her, and I give her my opinion, but my opinion's not good, of course, right? Dad's opinion's never good. And so when I asked that question, my thought in my head as I asked the question is, I'm going to take all these cuts from all these smart people I talk to, and I'm going to just put in a little montage for her and send it to her. And it's just because they're not teaching this in the schools. They're not teaching it in all of her marketing classes, and maybe it's just my lack of being an educator on them teaching the foundations, but they're still teaching billboards.
Yeah.
They're still teaching that way
Yeah.
and basic advertising like I had
Yeah.
in the '90s, and it's interesting because they take this as gospel and they're believing them because it's their teachers, and they're so far behind when they come out. It's I can see it. I can see it in her understanding of what's happening. It's
My
interesting.
advice would be to kind of like look at the blend of data science and kind of like creative sciences, particularly like short form content production,
Yeah.
the kind of like engineering mindset of kind of like test, iterate,
Right.
learn, fail fast. Kind of like as a if you want to get into marketing, you got to be thinking about it from an engineering perspective. We've created this new category of jobs called demand engineering, which is basically just trying to capture that mentality as we look at this like a kind of
Right.
like engineering team does, and the
Yeah.
people who thrive in are people with strong data knowledge, strong kind of like knowledge of kind of like content creation processes, and don't need to go kind of like call on kind of like centralized content teams to do things. They're quite happy using
Right.
AI tools or generating content themselves, and then they're kind of like yes, test, measure, kind of like move on type of mentality.
Hmm.
Those are the type of skills that I think are key. And to get that, you may need to blend kind of like different class schedules together, because if you look at the regular marketing kind of like curriculums, they tend, like you say, to be quite different in their thinking.
It is. There's a guy that I follow on online. He teaches at Duke. I think he might be a marketing. He's a business professor. I think it's like Professor Denon or something like that.
Yeah,
But he teaches a class on how to fail, learning to fail.
yeah,
And it's a really interesting, like I love his page, and I follow his work now, and read some of the writings that he has, and it's a really interesting path. And I actually I would love to see them teach that
yeah,
in the high school courses,
yeah.
for that. I got a curveball question kind of for
Okay,
you.
yeah.
Um, and I've asked this before, and a couple times I haven't quite gotten the same answer here. What is the biggest lie that we're telling young marketers about the actual role of a CMO today?
That it's fun. And
That's
actually,
funny. I haven't
right,
gotten that
it's
one
hard
either.
work. I mean, it is hard
Yeah.
work. You are in the middle of so many different kind of like parts of the business, and typically kind of like you are one of the biggest spenders in the business. So eyes are on you, and your ability to kind of like articulate the impact of the money that you're spending and the program investments that you're
Right.
making. It's a really tough job, and it's more kind of like business leader than kind of like marketing functional leader. When you get to the CMO level, kind of like you're really operating as a kind of like a as a business leader who just is kind of like deep in marketing. So
Yeah. You're not sitting there building funnels all day, is
no,
what you're saying. Yeah.
or kind of like creating campaign briefs or
Yeah.
working with agencies, kind of
Yeah.
like that's
Yeah. No,
you know
no more storyboards for you.
yeah, exactly. Mostly
That's
you're
it.
building kind of like um, you're building rationalization of the investments. And actually, that's a really kind of like interesting thing that kind of like I always notice with marketing teams. Is that most marketing teams, they think about their kind of like reporting and how they build their kind of like rationalization from a perspective of how do I justify what I have done, rather than how do I be completely transparent and lay out the good and the bad and the learnings. And I get so frustrated when teams
Yeah.
kind of like when you know kind of like a trying to just show you kind of like a justification for their activity. Well, it's what did you learn? What didn't go right? Kind of like and I think that's a key mentality that I'm always trying to change within marketing teams.
Yeah. Can you tell when someone comes to you with something pre-written that's AI on the
Yeah,
team
definitely.
when they say,
Yeah,
here's my justification? You can tell they just
yeah,
spent 3 hours on ChatGPT figuring it
yeah,
out.
yeah, 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 yeah,
That's got to be frustrating. The so I think I want to spend just a moment, and we know we're coming up on time here. What is exciting in Indeed today? I think a lot of people just know Indeed as a job board.
yeah,
And that's not the case, right? We know
yeah,
that's not the case. And earlier you mentioned matchmaking, right? And so I mean this has been something I think that's been tried a long time in this space. There's been dating companies like Match and some of the others that have gotten into this space and they failed for whatever reason. But I
yeah,
always thought that's actually a really great opportunity for a dating site, or however they frame themselves today. If you're matching someone on 29 points for love, why can't you match them on 29 points for a job?
yeah, exactly. Well, again, you can, and technology has moved quickly so that you can kind of like you can use kind of like so much more data to power those matching engines.
Yes.
But I think what's exciting in Indeed right now is, like I said earlier, this is truly an inflection point in the job markets, and kind of like so much is changing from kind of like the nature of work and the jobs which are available, um, to the skills that people are hiring for, to kind of like the way that kind of like different people entering the workforce are expecting to work, multiple jobs, lily padding versus kind of like linear careers, kind of like, and it's just so fascinating. And kind of like, I think that what excites me about Indeed is we sit on this enormous insight into all of this,
Yeah.
of changes in labor markets, in job postings, in skills requirements, in how job seekers are kind of like thinking about geographic mobility, etc., and our ability to kind of like be a guiding light throughout this huge transition that is going to take place over the next few years is really important. And I think the world needs Indeed now more than it's ever done to kind of like help people navigate through this. Because if you believe some of the news cycles, there are no jobs, and jobs are going away kind of like in a very short. It's just not true. Now there are big shifts taking place,
Sure.
but there are still a lot of jobs that basically need people, and our ability to kind of like connect people to those jobs and help them understand those changes is, I think, better than anyone else in this marketplace.
Yeah, and you're probably sitting. I mean, I have no empirical data to back this up. My gut would say you're sitting on probably, if not the largest, one of the largest piles of data to make these inferences as well.
Yeah. And there's a reason that central governments, policy making groups, central banks, um, all around the world rely on our hiring labs teams. And if you look in the US,
Yeah.
when the Bureau of Labor Statistics shut down, they were basically relying on us and ADP as key data sources to understand what was happening in the labor markets. And the key thing, the data that we have, is kind of like real time, unlike most kind of like labor force research that is done by.
Because you're seeing it real
You're
time
seeing it real time. Most kind of like labor market research done by others is sample based. It's kind of like, it's rearward looking. So there is enormous value in that data, and that puts us, I think, in a position of strength. If we take the perspective that, hey, kind of like, there's a lot of turmoil going on in the world, and if we can use that data to help people understand the reality, it's a strong thing.
Yeah, if you might not know this answer, and this is more Indeed specific. The question: wh- how much of the business is job seeking that everybody knows Indeed for, versus the actual data portion and all the work that you're doing through hiring labs and data, and the powering of everything that's happening outside of just job searching.
Yeah. We don't monetize the kind of like hiring lab data. It's a service that we make available free to our clients and kind of like, institutions around the world. So there's never an attempt to monetize it. But there's a significant kind of like resource pool which is engaged in that hiring labs team.
Yeah.
And it is a key part of our value proposition to our clients, and to job seekers, helping them understand where the jobs are.
Yeah, I don't even think people understand that's what, like, you do all of this. It's just they just, and that's okay. Like, they, if everyone knows you for what they need to know you
Yeah.
for, and there's a story behind each of that. James, this has been a really great conversation. I appreciate the time. I enjoyed this thoroughly. Learned a lot, which is good because I like to learn. So, to the audience, thank you for listening. James, thank you very much for coming on. And until next time.
Hey, you're welcome. Thank you.